Okay, welcome to the Winners Win podcast, a podcast about all things business, technology, and the people that make that magic happen. I'm quite excited because my guest today is best personified as the strategy Swiss Army knife. He's an entrepreneur. He's played the game at the highest level. And just to name some of those roles, he's been the Chief Strategy Officer for Ogilvy. He's been the executive head for digital and marketing at MultiChoice. He's been the president and CEO of Gray. And footnote, once you hit president in your title in corporate, you've cracked the ladder. He's a straight operator. I think I've said before that I love speaking to operators. He carries himself with a really strong degree of sophistication, and I'm glad to call him a friend. Tlali Taoana. How are you, my brother?
I'm good, my brother. What's going on?
Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much.
Are you well?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good.
Lovely.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. How's the week?
It's been good. It's been
Yeah,
good. Productive, good. But yeah,
Okay.
kicking on.
Okay. We were talking just before this, and I said to you, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Here's a scenario. This week's been a tough one.
Yeah.
Someone from the GNU calls you. They need a strategist. We're in a messy situation. How do we position this whole budget thing? Do you take the call and answer, or you put down the phone and say, that's not my fight?
Wow. Right at the blocks, my brother. No, for sure. Look, I mean, I think that it's pretty much a communication crisis that the GNU has, right? Where the misinformation, and we know we're living now in this world of misinformation, where we're swimming in it, whether it's from our friends across the Atlantic or any other spaces and businesses. Misinformation is very, very critical to take control of. And I think the GNU, the ANC, all stakeholders and parties involved really have not been able to quite clearly articulate where the problem is, what's actually happened here. I think for South Africans who are already under a lot of pressure, are feeling very uncomfortable about unilateral decisions being made. And I think that insofar as anything else, they need to look at this as a proper crisis, right? I think the South African people do need, and I think as an individual as well, I'm going, what are these policies that you're putting in place and where is it coming from? And showing us and taking us along the journey with them. Insofar as would I take that call or not, I think, work like this is important, but also work like this can be made in a lot of, how do I say this? In a lot of conjecture, a lot of subjectivity.
Yeah.
And if you know me, I like a lot of structure.
Of course.
And I think the crisis communication play here, probably not best suited for me. I think there's other people that I know who are super sharp in that kind of space.
Let me send you a number or something.
Let me send you a number or something. No comment. But I think that, again, it's it goes back to how you take people on a journey along with you, in terms of what your story is, what kind of decisions you're making. And in the PR world specifically, crisis comms is something that will always come up, and you can find a way to navigate that. But
You've had this, I think it's a privilege to be on both sides of the fence.
Sure.
If you work in hard corporate, like a MultiChoice, and you work in, I wanna use the term softer corporate, but agencies can also be cutthroat.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you contrast the difference? How do you define those two worlds from having lived or worked in both of them?
No, for sure.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I think that if you take what I like to call the anthropology of organizations, right? Politics, the career ladder, the success factors, the commercial factors, etc. Those all sit in the same space on both agency and corporate side,
Right.
or rather, if you want, we call it client side. If you're on the agency side,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And I think insofar as agencies are serious businesses,
Right.
I started out as, you started as a junior, you work your way up, etc. And you are the seduction of doing amazing creative work on great brands, etc. sometimes puts a lot of people in an agency in that bubble of, I just need to deliver and create the work,
Right.
but not really understand the business side of the organization, right? It depends on your career path, of course. And I was always quite keen to understand why maybe agencies weren't always taken as seriously as corporates,
Right.
as organizations such as your blue chip companies, etc. In the agency world, I think the fundamental difference is that you are able to impart and input and impact and influence the way you see the world more than you could maybe in a corporate.
Gotcha.
I chose to work in agency not because, I guess maybe back in the days there was a bit of a different tinge to advertising. It was a little bit more loose, and
Yeah.
you're younger. It's a great environment to be in, but the cultures of agencies were so unique and so specific back in the days, right? If you went to a TBWA, you knew it was very much disruptors, rebels. There was a very particular way of doing the work, which then translated to how you were as someone walking into the agency, right? And I think clients also bought into that. They bought into, these are the disruptors, or these are sort of very strategic, like your Ogilvy's, etc. And maybe highly uniquely creative. So the cultures of agencies were always so clear and present, and it's just amazing to have seen that. We'll probably touch on that a little bit later in terms of what's happening in Adland with all the different mergers and what's happening with the different agencies. But insofar as I think agencies have a unique way of tapping into a behavioral culture, and a culture that I wouldn't say cultish, but allows for people to really express themselves and be comfortable in that environment.
Gotcha.
I think corporates, yes, absolutely. We have the mission, vision, and purpose statements of an organization, but corporate is serious business. It's seen to be serious
Survival
business.
of the fittest.
100%.
Yeah.
And you walk in there, and corporate can easily chew you out, chew you up and spit you out very quickly, right? I think that the codes and the rules are slightly different.
Yes.
If I may look at it a very, very simplistic kind of way, right? But having been on both sides, I don't necessarily have a preference. I think what...
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think what as I said, I enjoyed the cultural push and the personality of agencies, a bit more camaraderie as well.
Yes.
I think it opens up. On the corporate side, you have ability to build legacy. You own budgets, you own the drives, and you own the markets, right? And I think insofar as that, for me, is actually a powerful way to build legacy. Ironically enough, you find probably, I don't want to make a sweeping statement in terms of percentages, but I would say that more than half of agency people end up in the corporate space.
Right.
It's an age thing.
Starting at agency and then into...
moving, yeah. You find clients not necessarily going back into agency, or even ones that came from agency. You find some clients who probably go into more of a consulting kind of space, but definitely not an agency, right? And there's a bigger conversation here actually around what is an agency.
Right.
It's very clear around what a blue chip company like a whatever bank or a telco is. Yeah. But what is an agency? Is it a service supplier? Is it a service provider? Is it a partner? Is it an integrated organization that delivers an intersection of technology and creative?
Right.
I think marketing is actually in a bit of a crisis zone at the moment in terms of defining itself. So again, what is agency? What does that look like? And
who would you say is responsible for the crisis that is marketing at the moment?
Sure. I mean, that conversation is a fresh one, but it's one that's quite pertinent. I think there's a lot of sense, I feel, around there's potentially a lot of unknowns happening, right? Be it from what does it take to build a great brand in 2025, right? What tools do you have? What do you invest in when it comes to your marketing dollars, right? I mean, you have anything from AI to digital marketing or performance marketing overshadowing proper old school brand building, I think budgets have shrunk. There's just so many other ways of routes to market for your products for consumers. There's also so many more different and smaller players who are disrupting the marketplace. So I think there's a bit of a tension, a little bit of navel gazing that needs to happen. It's insofar as what really we need to understand is this ecosystem that is clients and agencies and what marketing is, etc. So I think we have to, there's definitely an issue there.
Yeah. There's a very strong, shall I call it a sort of peer-to-peer understanding of what happens in agencies.
For sure.
You would see an ad and not know what ecosystem it's gone through to get there. Historically, I know that big accounts are generally fought for by the agencies.
Yeah.
The agencies you've been a part of, were they 360 or were they specifically media or creative? For example, what's Grey? Is Grey?
So Grey is a full service agency.
It's a full service agency. So if someone's looking from the outside in, define that process of landing big accounts. How does it work? Like at a very practical level?
No, for sure. At a very practical level, I think it's like any other RFP or any other tender or any other request for
Proposals.
The services of agencies, right? So proposals, correct, right? So you, absolutely. I think that you have the big organizations that go through a cycle of 3 to 5 years in terms of their, from a procurement perspective and who they then send that out to, right? It can get a bit more complex with the bigger clients. So if you're talking about your banks, your telcos, your big FMCG companies, the guys who spend upwards of 200-300 million a year on media, I mean, that would be deemed a very large client, right? You're most likely find that the big group and global agencies are the ones that sit in it. So we've got a big, I think it's 4 to 6. It's kind of it's a bit like the Premier League, right? You have this sort of top 4 to top 6, which kind of mixes up, right? So practically, if you wanted to get a big account, I think the first thing would be obviously to make sure that you have a full service suite of offerings, right? So Grey, for instance, full service, from digital to communications to PR to being able to tap into media from a overall sort of a group perspective, WPP. But then also you have the ability to come together as smaller agencies, so independents, and you may be a very creative hot shop, but you're finding a lot of people coming together at the creative hot shop, and you have the media guys coming together, form a consortium and drive it forward, right? The RFP is RFP, right? The pitches, getting onto pitch lists sometimes is a bit different.
Right.
So you have, I think in the past, a lot of organizations sort of just went, here's RFP, everybody and their mother can, kind of pitch for this business. What they've done is that you get pitch consultants now who actually...
the pitch consultants consulting the agencies.
Pitch consultants consulting to the clients.
Oh,
so the pitch consultants will go to the clients, and the the clients will go, look, we're ready to pitch. I don't want to mention any brands or names now on the show, right?
Of course.
But let's say a big bank says, I want to go out for pitch. The bank will go, all right, fine. Here are our criteria. This is what we're requiring in terms of a service provider. These are, and criteria could range from anything like obviously BEE, years in service, have a good track record, financially stable. The pitch consultants then actually will go and find agencies And I mean, there are, let's say, 100 agencies that they can obviously talk to, that they're aware of, because a lot of the pitch consultants have ex-agency experience.
Right.
And then what they'll ultimately do is go, here's the vetting process. The vetting process is a few criteria, and that then comes back to the client. There's literally almost then 5 agencies or 10 agencies left who've gone through that vetting program, and then they go into a shortlisting approach, right? So the bigger companies are a lot more stringent, a lot more clear about their requirements. I think as you sort of go into a more mid-tier to smaller company, I don't think those things are governed by the ACA, which is the Advertising Communications Authority, or governed by anyone else. It's just literally coming in to pitch for the work. And thing. Another thing that's important, and maybe an advice to, I guess, younger agencies coming up, etc., is, because I imagine that's sort of where your question is stemming from, is sometimes the bigger companies offer pitch rejection fees, if you may, right? So understand that if you are going after one of the really large mobile companies, right, a pitch is not just you putting together a proposal. A pitch is actually you putting forward your point of view, almost your, selling the strategy or giving them a point of view on your strategy, as well as giving them a point of view on your creative. Right. So how does that look like, right? And that costs money to build up a pitch deck, proposals, but that is 100% competitive, and you actually have to hire actually maybe more creatives, or you may have to hire or get more data points, etc.
Got you.
So it is an expensive process. If you had to go to an architect and tell him to build your house, go design me a house and build it, then I'll decide on the day, once all the furniture and everything else is moved in, whether or not I like the house or not.
Right.
Okay. So it's really, really a difficult environment for a smaller agency, because you have to put your best foot forward on any pitch that you go into. If you're going up against another big agency who has a lot more, a lot more resources, etc., than you do, then how does that actually work out for you? You know? So for the longest time, I think the South African ad industry hasn't been able to really form a strong base of small independent agencies that can compete toe-to-toe. I think that's changed over the years where, with BE, for instance, it's, forced clients and agencies, particularly maybe the bigger ones, to really start reviewing, one, who they partner up with, or two, who they are actually awarding the work to. All right. And I absolutely believe in that completely. Right. But going back to that conversation around the pitch fees, I think that absolutely I would beat very loudly on a drum to say that agencies should be compensated for very significant pitches, all right, which they do, right, in certain instances. I've worked across the continent, and unfortunately South Africa is the more mature market when it comes to having bodies that regulate how pitches are managed, bodies that regulate, or there's an open almost line of communication for agencies to say these pitches are maybe unfavorable to smaller agencies, or these pitches are actually not run in a particularly ethical way, right? So South Africa has gone quite far ahead in that. But
on that point, sorry to interrupt,
no worries.
The thought around how it disadvantages smaller agencies. Do any of the bigger agencies ever outsource any of the work to smaller agencies?
Yeah.
Is that a way to get them to win?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Right. It is still a competitive landscape, right? And your big global agencies, they'll have done their own enterprise development, if I may. That's a fancy word. I wouldn't think they'd call it that, but that's really what it is, right? And
I'll say it. So essentially, they open their own smaller boutique agencies 100%. That they own, and then the distribution of the business goes into that,
right?
As opposed to empowering outsiders.
100%, right? And I think some of the better ones then do stimulate ownership, right? Because I think that's also super important. It's not about just having, previously disadvantaged or people of color
Right.
in boardrooms, you need to actually shift the ownership. And I think some of the better agencies have done really good in terms of doing that, right? Which I think that's how you protect the industry. That's how you grow the industry, right?
You're an example of that, but that's really good. What are your thoughts around the relevance of an agency where the likes of a SAB, for example, now have their own internal agency?
Yeah, so I mean, it was something that I probably figured that we were going to have a discussion around, which is, and it goes back to my earlier point around what this ad land ecosystem is looking like, right? You have people moving away from retainers. You have clients going to more project drives. So I don't want to have an agency on my retainer. I don't want to pay you a retainer every month. I literally just want to have 4 or 5 agencies that I can pick and choose on my roster who'll be best suited to the work or needs that I've got, right? Then you have the in-house folk, right? And the in-house folk, I'm on the fence of that a little bit, but I've got a particular point of view. Because I've built an in-house agency before, and I've seen an agency being decimated because the in-house agency became a reality for the client. Right. And I've also seen in-house agencies that have actually failed dismally, right, in terms of being able to really crack the work or deliver the work. There's no perfect model, but
what was the limitation on the internal one failing? Talent?
It was capabilities. Absolutely, capabilities. But also because I think sometimes your decision making is, so organizations need to be set up in a certain way for you to have an in-house agency.
Right.
It's got to be a very collaborative environment. It can't be federated. It can't be siloed. It can't be hierarchical, because agencies actually are quite flat in terms of, when decisions get made around what are the best creators, etc. Right. So I'll give you a perfect example. I was working with a fintech, and this fintech didn't want to have lesson control. They didn't want to. They wanted to have control over their entire product to market journey.
Right.
And they felt that if they did it, if they had an ad agency, that they wouldn't have control. Now that is someone as a founder putting the hat on, going, our system works in such a way that we work in such a quick way. We actually need the people inside. So the model works, right? Because you're going, I want to make sure that I can take my product to market very quickly, very innovatively, but I can also pivot, I can change and shift, etc. Right? I think some of the bigger organizations, because I think fintechs have a lot of in-house agency capabilities, etc. Then the bigger organizations have to also be realistic about what capability they've got in their organization that allows for them to run it efficiently, right?
Because the culture may not support
100%, right?
It's what you said earlier.
You're exactly right. Okay. So I mean, if you're like a startup, scale up mentality, etc., you're just moving at such a great pace, and you're able to find ways to really because you're putting different hats on, right? I think in the big organizations, it is a question mark. I've seen it as well not work so well even in the startup space, where I think there's you just can't separate yourself from hiring the people who can do it best and letting them run with it. And to tell you the truth, your CEO should not be signing off on copy. I'm sorry to any really super involved CEO, but you shouldn't be signing off copy. You shouldn't be
CEO or CMO.
CEO.
Okay.
CEO. I think that you literally should be hiring great talent, and I actually believe that if you years ago, I don't know how that's transpired, but years ago, Woolworths actually went in-house.
Right.
So I think Jupiter Drawing Room were their agency. They decided that they'd be better off in-house. I think a lot of the people actually from Jupiter went into
Woolworths.
Exactly right. And it's just the natural progression, maintain the capabilities and driving that. But what is it about? Is it about control? Is it about a focus on? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I was not involved at that time in that space, and they ran with it. And I mean, Woolworths, I think to this day still runs an in-house agency, and it's also dependent on what you need, right? If you are And I think in this day and age, if you're looking at design work, you're looking at just getting work out that is consistent, coherent, and you need it to kind of just take over. I think that's fine. I wouldn't imagine in-house agencies necessarily doing a lot of the bigger brand thinking work, etc. I think that in terms of your day-to-day running, that would kind of work, you know. But as I said, the models work both ways, but you've got to set yourself up for it in a perfect way.
Yeah.
You know?
You've worked on the rest of the continent as well.
Yeah.
What are some of the markets you worked on, and what is the main difference between working in SA and then working in the likes of East and then West Africa?
Yeah, but that's such an interesting question because it keeps on popping up, I think, for a lot of people and a lot of brands and a lot of clients, right? On a personal response to the question, I've traveled to 34 countries on the continent.
Oh, beautiful.
And honestly speaking, I would not have been able to travel that much if it wasn't for my work taking me there. It's just so damn expensive for an African, let alone visa costs. You know, it is quite, and this continent is damn big, you know, it's etc. But
and sometimes you have to travel out of the continent.
This is it. Yeah, I remember. When was I flying to? I think I was flying to Morocco. I had to fly to Turkey and then come back in, right? You know, but blessed times, and I think I want to answer your question in two ways. Right. Obviously, the first question that you asked me was where I'd worked, right? So obviously the main centers. I lived in East Africa. I lived a little bit in West Africa as well. But I think the critical difference is my own mentality in terms of working in other markets, right? I have a blended journey as a kid. Grew up in Europe, grew up in Germany. My dad's from Lesotho. Did my high school and varsity in Johannesburg. And so I've moved around quite a bit.
Okay.
So I was able to always tap in, and I think that curiosity never left me. So I get on a plane, and I remember my first work trip outside of South Africa. I was going to Nigeria, and my team, obviously it was my boss and a couple other seniors, and I was working for consultancy at that time, and we were doing some work with the Nigerian banks. Day 2 or 3, it was very difficult for me to contain myself in those 4 walls of that hotel room. But we had the most massive security detail. Right. You know, just always this is Lagos, right? And we were in Vic Island, right? But I mean, it was like
that's the nice set.
Because it's not bad, right? It's not, and the bank was like, no, you guys will, it's one of the big banks at that time. Actually, they were consolidating a whole lot of banks. But having said that, and I couldn't understand how we could be working in a market and I couldn't see the place. I was sitting in my hotel.
Oh, I see.
And
so you were restricted.
Restricted and, etc. And then the one evening I actually met another South African in the lobby. And I called my partners and I said, look, I'd love to just go out to a restaurant, just go and experience the world.
What in their minds were they protecting you against?
I think they were just we probably also have some insurance. Kidnapped. We got some some hectic travel insurance, whatever it is. And but it was interesting because I didn't foray too far, and I was quite young, and obviously you keep within the confines of what you're told to do when you're a junior strategist. But,
of course.
But what that allowed me to do was always to look at a place and try and either live or stay or eat like a local. I think that's now run with me as well when I travel, for leisure, right? I'm always 70% local vibes.
Absolutely.
And then 30%. You gotta go and see a few things, right?
For the gram.
You gotta see a few things. But from a work perspective, that helped me so much because it allowed me to always not be the South African. We're quite boisterous, actually. South Africans come in there and we're bulldozing and we think we know or whatever it is. And you must go there to unlearn as much as you're going to go teach.
That's beautiful.
Right?
Yeah.
And being in those places and always tapping in, even where I stayed, wasn't in the expat sort of little village. Yes. I stayed more with the, with the locals.
By the way, do you know that a lot of expats are paid a hardship fee on.
100%.
I don't know. I don't know if that's.
But I'm a black South African. I don't know if you'd call me an expat. I don't think black South Africans are really called expats.
I've heard so many people that heard this hardship fee on top of their salaries. I was like,
no, that's crazy, man. It's crazy. But I mean, just to, I guess, on that, and I've always taught my teams. I mean, when I was at Ogilvy, we had 24 different agencies across the continent. Can you imagine the different types of teams?
Within the group?
Within the group.
Okay.
So we were headquartering anything outside of SA, we were headquartering out of Kenya, out of Nairobi. So you can imagine outside from Nairobi, you are now not necessarily playing puppet master, but you're playing a coordination role across 24 different countries. West, East, the islands, Anglo, Lusophone countries, etc. How do you manage that? Because you have been tasked by clients to go, you work across the continent, whether it's Airtel, Coca-Cola, Unilever, we're coming to you to help us to coordinate and make sure that our brands and our interests are taken care of, right? So the flights that I used to take, I was literally on the plane every single week. But you're flying in, and the one thing that you can't do is come in and go, this is the way, you have to appreciate it's culture first.
Absolutely.
It's culture first, then it's business, right? Relationship first, then it's business.
Absolutely.
So it helped me a lot because I'm quite affable like that. Where I could speak the language, I try and speak the language, but that's not always the easiest way to kind of overcome that. But that's been my journey in the continent, and it's been amazing and fantastic, and lifelong friends for that, but also great work.
Absolutely.
Because we put that first in terms of just understanding. And I think if anyone's listening who's saying, well, I want to experience the rest of the continent, I want to work, again, go there to learn and unlearn, go there to teach and be taught. But this thing of the South African hat of ours of going, we know what's right, we've been doing it for a long time, etc.
It's not.
No, it's not.
It's definitely the wrong attitude.
No, it is.
To have when you're going in
100%.
there. You and I were talking about the magic of products like M-Pesa. I was looking at Kantar. You were at Kantar at some point. They just released, I think, a while ago, Africa's top brands. I never would have imagined that a telco would be, because MTN is Africa's most valuable brand.
Yeah.
And I think F&B is South Africa's most valuable brand. When you look through that list, there are not many companies owned by people that look like you and I.
Yeah.
In your thinking, why do you think that is? And how do we get there? And it's not about, in my view at least, I think that business is hard. Business is hard for everyone, right? And the dynamics are not always around the color of your skin. It is important, but I'm keen to get your thoughts on, what would it take for us to build these amazing brands to get to that level?
Look, I mean, I guess there's, socioeconomically, you're on the continent, you can't look at business or success without looking at through the socioeconomic lens, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that the stimulation of what business is, entrepreneurship is, etc., needs a lot of work, right? Whether it's, from players like the IDC or just general trade organizations or even private sector. I think that going back to that word now it's more relevant. Enterprise development is really, really critical, right? And enterprise development can't also just always be the sexy startup is your book got here, scaling up, startup, scale up, or like a cool tech idea that I've got, etc. And some VC is going to come and give me a couple of $1 million, whatever it is. I think it has to be realistic about what would push the country forward. And I think that is a blanket approach across the rest of the continent. However, having said that, South Africa for me, and it's good that I've got this perspective now, I feel that we don't have as much of a entrepreneurship DNA than other countries. And maybe it's something a little bit contentious to say, but traveling around and I see it, and it has to go, you have to look at it from the grassroots up, right? So a lady doing hair on the side of Bree Street versus a lady doing hair in Nairobi, one of the main roads there, etc., and even in the CBD. That's her business.
Right.
She's looking at that business. She's got her phone and she's put an Instagram page on there, selling weaves, selling her wear, selling everything else. Go to West Africa, you do the same thing. It's a very different story here, where I think it's only starting now. I think it's happened like organically, and I think, obviously with the advent of just adoption of digital, and we're speaking about that earlier, right? But I think that we still haven't seen entrepreneurship as something that can really drive us forward, as South Africans, for instance, right? I think that there's a bit of a stronger, and I don't know if it's just a byproduct of opportunities or a byproduct of maybe South Africa has more of a structure when it comes to the employment sector, etc. But maybe that's also what people think.
Right.
I mean, I definitely come from a generation where my mother was, hey, you go to varsity to go get a job.
Right.
You're not going to varsity to go and learn. You're going to varsity to go get a job. You're going to university to go into a 9 to 5, and everyone else that you should look up to is someone who has a 20 or 30 year corporate career. Doesn't work like that. I think it's shifted, obviously, with entrepreneurialism, but also, what is it that we're actually building? We've got a lot of content creators. We've got a lot of, the creative economy is something that is so stimulated and should be so stimulated on the African continent. It's powerful, but is it that is going to build the next titan of the future, or the next titan of industry, or the next big business that becomes the number one brand, right? I don't know, right? And I think we have to start looking at these definitions in a bit of a kind of clearer way, right? So if you're looking at the Kantar Brand Z, I think it's called, the valuation, for those who maybe don't know, that's actually not just going top 100 cool brands. It's not you going around asking consumers. It's actually a full-on statistical and mathematical model that looks at, if you had to sell your brand tomorrow, or someone came into your door and said, I'm going to buy this brand, there's a valuation to it. It's got the intangibles on the balance sheet. It's got everything sitting on there that actually calculates it in a very, very unique manner, right? Okay, fine. So those are those brands. Where do Africans fall into play there? What are we building? I was joking the other day around how it's so beautiful. If you wanted to pivot, you could literally just pivot into agriculture. Okay. Most countries in the African continent are still 70% agrarian kind of based, right? The economy, what stimulates the economy. But a lot of us still have this image of a bent over black person.
That's correct.
Being a farmer.
It's not a tech-enabled vision.
100%, right. But it could be such a powerful thing. I mean, why aren't we going more into that space, Right. So how are we looking at this, and how are we actually stimulating? I mean, I've got 2 young sons, and having conversations with them around what they want to do afterwards maybe falls into your place, into your question rather, around how do you create the next, I mean, you have Dangote, of course, but how do you create the next? Is it captains of industry? Is that a corporate thing? More entrepreneurs? I think it has to be in the entrepreneur space.
Absolutely.
But what's stimulating that, and how is that really being kind of created? How is that being supported in terms of building that ecosystem for that?
We once hopped into a meeting, and before you hopped on, your AI got into the into the meeting, and I was like, I'm always glad, because I've got a friend who says to me, "You are AI before."
Yeah, nice.
Because I've done the deep dive and I've already seen how it's impacted me. You're a knowledge worker.
Yeah.
How have you integrated AI into your world at the moment?
Absolutely, fully. Even in my last tenure at Gray, a lot of the work that we were doing was really building up what this looks like for us going forward.
Right.
Right. So how do you balance the human element?
Right.
And the robot, and it's not a either or, it's the tyranny of all, right? Mm-hmm. It's efficiencies come into play, amazing stuff. Grunt work, ability to knock out proposals quite quickly. Mm-hmm. There's a lot that AI has really supported us in. And I think the narrative I always had was no one in that business should ever feel the need that, or rather should fear AI. in terms of it's either replacing roles or it's doing this, etc. I think we're still quite far away from there, but it's definitely coming, right? And also, what skills do you need to learn? Your continuous learning skills need to be built around, are you able to really, I guess, control it, prompt it? Those are the skills that actually, I think, it's like the people, the ones that are valued are the people that are actually going to be able to kind of build and make the robots do what they needed to do. You know, I think that insofar as I, as a knowledge worker, from a consulting perspective, or when I work with clients, etc., I absolutely find the perfect timings to work with it. But as a good friend of mine yesterday said, he was like, you know, if you don't know what you're doing, then AI is not going to save you.
You're cooked anyway.
You know, type of thing, right? So I don't really have a huge point of view of where AI is. I think that I'm like everyone else, watching it develop and watching it develop at such an amazing pace and waiting and hoping to see its applications, right? And testing those. Right, I think there's some areas where we've already been very quite clear about how generative AI and ChatGPT, etc., can, you know, just sharpen and make things more efficient. But what about other spaces, right? We're looking at ads, right? I mean, I'm sure you've seen, you know, there's a lot of ads out there that have had a lot of assist in AI, and there's ads which have been made completely out of AI, and then there's people are going, well, actually, you know, we should never be using AI. So I think the world is also just trying to come to grips with it, right? I think specifically in the marketing and advertising world is, how do we use it to our benefit? Where can it help us to become more efficient? How can it help to, because commercially, I think we also have to be very clear about this. And all of the big agencies have invested in their own AI programs that are just specific to them. So it's definitely, and look, AI has always been there, right? It's just that we are moving up the layers of its capabilities, right? So we always had technology that would help to drive and fix things and, you know, move us forward, right? We're just getting into another layer of AI, right? Ironically enough, and maybe another contentious thing, maybe don't look at the advertising guys. I mean, look at your lawyers, right? Look at your lawyers. I mean, look at your lawyers, analysts, you know, researchers, etc. You know, you always need a creative person, you know, because creativity is also not a science. So, you know, and you come and meet if you want. It isn't. It's just something there that, you know, it's a spark and etc. You know.
In part 2, I wanted to talk about what you just said now. Creativity is not a science. I think the machines are going to get it down to a science. And that's the scary part. I'll send you a video of Ben Affleck and how he talks about the fact that he doesn't believe AI is going to do away with movie creators because movie creating is a matter of taste, right? The AI can generate the video, etc., but does it know when to stop, how to write the story, etc., etc.? Because these things are ever learning, they're going to turn them into a science. So if you look at what Sora is able to do, and the hardest thing about these things is, this is the dumbest they will ever be. And already they are surpassing us. I think there's a really strong admission of that. You know, we're still talking as if it's very nascent. And at its nascent place, it's already overtaken us. I definitely think we need a round 2. I saw vinyls on your story the other day. What's your origin story from a music point of view? I don't know anyone else who's playing vinyl at the moment.
I think also with all this tech talk, right? Let's go back to a little bit of that, you know, lo-fi, lo-fi technology, right?
We were alive once, yes.
You know, but look, I think I've always been a culture hunter. And I've always loved pop culture, but also just being a student of art and design and all the things that we actually make us human, the stuff that we create. You just spoke about it now, right? The science of it and etc. So DJ background back in the
Okay,
days.
okay.
Ran a club back in the days.
This is what comes up.
Yeah, this is what
Part
comes
two,
up
right.
in part two. And yeah, I mean, it's quite amazing because my eldest son, he's probably a little bit more like me. He's got a very artistic flair to him,
Okay.
which is probably why I was drawn to ad land in the marketing world, etc. Right? I mean, economics graduates, and sort of career in banking. That was where I was going to be at, CA route, etc. And I think it's just having things around you that allow allow for your personality to shine through.
Of course.
And there's something beautiful about a vinyl, right? Is that it's sure we've got a billion songs on our phone at our fingertips, right? The intentionality of taking out a record
Yes.
that you want to listen to and putting it onto a record player and playing it and lifting the needle, etc. is just something that's
It's an experience.
It's an experience, and it's also something
Can
that you
you
just
imagine?
don't
Yeah.
because our world is so instantaneous in our world, whatever, etc. And my son now, he's gotten into it. It's a bit of an expensive hobby now because I think about 4 or 5 years ago, vinyls outsold CDs, which is maybe a conversation for about old technologies and how those have kind of fallen away, right? So vinyls have made a huge thing. I guess people
They've made a resurgence.
big time,
Really?
where people have maybe there's a zeitgeist of nostalgia.
Okay.
Maybe there's a zeitgeist of vintage. I don't know, but it's really being pushed by Gen Z.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, My son is a Gen Z, right? So, but yeah, I mean, I think my collection is really good. And it's also funny story. If you pass away, your Apple Music library cannot be put into your will. You can't hand it over. You can't give it. You can't.
Your Apple Music library cannot be put into your will.
Well, let's put it this way. Maybe not put it into your will, but it can't be.
Okay,
your Apple
you can't
Music,
transfer it.
your Apple Music library cannot be handed down as you would hand down anything.
The physical. Vinyls, etc.
So there's a
your
physical
playlists and all that.
So there's a physical thing to it. Okay. So I own that library. I own those books. I own those vinyls.
Makes sense.
I can absolutely give it to my son. But don't quote me on that. I just remember there was a court case a couple of years ago where someone was trying to go, why can't I give away? They're like, no, it's a subscription model. Everything is subscription.
Of course.
It's not ownership, right? So I think that was what the court case was. Don't quote
I have a tradition as we close out.
Yeah.
I ask everyone, what's the one idea you've had that you haven't had the time to execute on?
Sure. But now I'm giving this idea away, right?
That's why you're paying it forward.
They're paying it forward. Oh my goodness. It's a very...
And here's the thing about ideas.
I've got a few of them.
Most people don't execute.
We don't, right? Yeah. We don't. I think that it's funny because, and it's actually a brilliant question, because it also makes me think about the ideas that I had that were actually executed by someone. So the idea of...
and you watch them execute.
And just watch them execute.
Better than you?
Well, you'll never know, right? But you just
Right.
Damn it, you got in quick. I look at a Howler, for instance, right? Howler...
the ticketing platform.
The ticketing platform. But this is the trick here, right? It's not about a ticketing platform. It's about a seamless experience when it comes to eventing for both the person who's running the event and the person who's attending the event. What is the most frustrating thing growing up? I was varsity here in Joburg, and you're going out to shows and concerts. CompuTicket had this amazing monopoly. You'd have to go to the stores, you'd have to do whatever it is, no real feedback, no service, and apologies to anyone who worked at CompuTicket or anything else, but it just wasn't a great experience. And I didn't understand why they had this monopoly on this. And always to think about, what if there was a real end-to-end seamless integration of, from the time you see the billboard of the person that you want to go see to the time that you actually leave in the concert feeling utterly satisfied, right? It came from, I guess, school, and when you look at other brands doing it really well, sort of a seamless, full-on experience, right? And then technology came into play, so that allowed then obviously as well for you to have better interactions and engagements. I've always just that was something I wanted to do for a long time. I ran a club. Obviously in your 20s, you're grooving, so you're in the entertainment space, and it was a business that I really, really wanted to drive because I think that it was just something that was amazing. I look at businesses like that, but it obviously then always just goes into a space of why didn't you start it, or what held you back? But I look back at it and I go, the timing wouldn't have been right? Because the technology just wouldn't have been there. I'm sure you had taxi operators who wanted to do things just before Uber did them, whatever it is. Actually, I remember there was a night bus that was supposed to go from Fourways or Midrand, I think it was Fourways, and there's a road, I think it's Willem Nickel, goes all the way down to Jan Smart's, and literally this night bus would stop at every single big party venue area, right? So from Fourways to Sandton, from Sandton to Rosebank to downtown or Parkhurst, downtown to Joburg, etc. And they literally had this night bus that they were going to run. And it was a big thing, and people were like, well, we're excited about this, and bam, Uber hit, right?
What
Just
better technology?
Are
you saying Uber should launch a Uber bus?
I think that
Maybe Uber Groove bus?
Uber Groove bus, I think that you know what, Joburg is, I'm a Joburger through and through.
Right.
Joburg is such a brilliant city and a beautiful city. And what makes Joburg is really how people groove, interact. You can go partying in Joburg on your own. I know safety-wise, etc. That's not, it sounds like a bit of a wild swing, but the reality is that if you could really connect Joburg properly, just before COVID, if you remember how Joburg was peak Joburg.
It was a buzz.
I mean, you had Afropunk, then you had Global Citizen, Maboneng was vibing, downtown Braamfontein was a vibe, the parks were amazing, all these spots were opening up in Rosebank, new hotels, Marble had just opened up. This place was buzzing, and you knew it was like dope people, like cool people. It wasn't like touristy, but just great professionals, cool people hanging out. And from a cosmopolitan perspective, it was amazing.
Yeah,
COVID hit, bam. Restaurants, small little hidden
turned upside down.
speakeasies. No one is traveling to Maboneng anymore. Braamfontein got overrun. It's actually a pity because Joburg is also made up of these wonderful, beautiful villages. Norwood, Parkhurst, Rosebank. These are villages that have their own life and their own groove, etc. Right? So I think if they wanted to do Uber Groove Bus, I think it would
would have worked. It would have worked.
But yeah, man. But maybe we'll leave that for part 2. I'll go back into the archives and think about the idea that I really wanted to explode and see that we share with you guys. Yeah,
absolutely. Man. Ladies and gentlemen, Tlali Taoana, thank you so much.
My brother.
It's been good to have you.
All right, good chat, man.
That's your episode of Winners Win. Subscribe, like, and remember to tell a friend to tell a friend. We out.